Dana White walks off the set of the Howie Mandel podcast. This has been going around. I mean, this is going around everywhere. And anybody that's aired it also gives the caveat, hey, this doesn't look real. Have you guys seen it? Allow me to set the stage for you real fast. They're in a small podcast studio. Howie introduces Dana. When Howie gets done, it is now Dana's turn to go. And he thanks Howie for the very nice introduction. It was very nice. I mean, Howie went on and he only said nice things. And Dana said, you know what? I'm tired of doing podcasts. In fact, I'm done. I'm not doing any more podcasts. And he was polite and he was calm. He didn't curse. In fact, he said the exact words that I just said. He said, took the headset off and got up and walked out. Now, there would be no reason to do that, correct? You agreed to a podcast. You're trying to get a message out. You're there. It's began. It's Howie Mandel. You're not like running an angle here with a great worker. So people have come to the conclusion that it was a staged something. And I must tell you, I have a very different conclusion. I think Dana White got up and walked out. I don't think he's mad at Howie. He didn't pretend to be mad at Howie. But staging it would just involve a number of steps. I mean, let's start at the beginning. Howie Mandel has a podcast. I mean, that's news that nobody knew, correct? And even with this thing going around, and Howie is the first to put it out. Howie didn't realize what he had, but he knew he had something, so he didn't just burn it. He edited, he broke it off, and he's the one that put it out to the world. It then got picked up, and other people are putting it out. And so many people said, hey, that's fake. And you know what? I don't know that it is. It doesn't look right. I agree with that. And it doesn't seem as though there would be any kind of a spoof to getting up and walking out. But I can tell you this. The set that they were on was subpar. I'll put it like that. They're wearing, let me just give you a great example. Do you know the podcast? And there's no barrier to entry. Like everybody has a podcast. You might have a podcast. For sure, your neighbor and or friends in your very close circle has a podcast. You'll know somebody that does because there's no barriers to entry. But when you have a professional that works in the space of entertainment, there are certain things from a production standpoint that should not exist on your neighbor's podcast. For example, Dana White has to take a headset off to say goodbye. He never should have been wearing a headset. I mean, not for nothing, but the fact that Howie Mandel has been in TV this long and he's working with a production crew that has him wearing a headset. I mean, let's just start with that. That's enough to irritate anybody, in all fairness. There's then a gentleman there, seems like a perfectly nice guy. Howie refers to him as a ginger. The gentleman has red hair. I don't know that ginger is derogatory, but I don't personally like it. I don't personally like that you would refer to somebody as that. I would just think that that's weird. Moreover, Howie introduced Dana in possibly the most sincere way I've ever heard Dana introduced. There was possibly the biggest lack of sincerity. I mean, Howie said, I look up to you. I would question, if I could challenge Howie on that right now, what is it about Dana you look up to? I don't think he knows anything about him. I don't. I think he just said that. What does that mean to you, Howie? That means that you're used to being around people where you've got the most money, but this guy has more money, so you say you look up to him? That is so superficial, it's disgusting, and I can't imagine any other reason he said it. Does Howie have a fantasy about running a fight? What is it about Dana that Howie wishes that he was doing? And moreover, when he was putting the praise on Dana, he referred to Dana White as a philosopher. He actually said those words. And there's something about it that you can't fully describe without making yourself look like a complete jerk. Right? Like there's things that you can't say. You can't go in and make fun of the fact that Howie has headsets on. A lot of people do. It doesn't take away from the fact that lacks a value of production. And I know that's not why Dana got up and walked out. I'm just sharing for you, when you're dealing with an expert that's in the space, when you're dealing with a guy that's been in TV for 3 generations and he decides that he's going to go executive produce something on his own and he's got such a terrible set that he's got a headset. Not for nothing. Who was the redheaded guy? Is the redheaded guy a co-host? If he is, then he should have been there. If he's a co-host on Howie's podcast that nobody watches, he should be there. But if he wasn't, if he's a guest himself, he should not have been there. Howie should not have brought Dana White into a room to do a level of production with a gentleman that doesn't have anything to do with it. That would be a big miss. I've had that happen to me. Believe me, it would be a miss. Now, moreover, is the introduction in and of itself. Guys, if I had, let me just think, I'm just trying to go off the top of my head. Who's somebody I'd like to meet? I'd like to meet Kanye West. There you go. That was right off the top of my head. But if Kanye was here with me, who's a big star, he's globally known. There's a reason that while I'm rich, he's richer. I mean, I'm trying to think of the Howie Mandel situation, right? There's a reason. I don't introduce him as a music artist, even though he is. I don't introduce him as a top-selling, Grammy Award-winning, 2-time platinum. I don't do those things. Why? Because it's so well known, I shouldn't have to. I'm not sure I introduce him as Kanye West. I think I just start the interview. And possibly if I need to set the table somewhere, I would say, President of the UFC, Dana White, how you doing? Boom, and I'm into it, right there. But for Howie to bring Dana on and do an introduction, first off, it's not true. Dana's not a philosopher. Just like that was a really silly thing to say. I also don't believe that Howie looks up to him. And if he does, it would be for the most superficial reasons that you could possibly imagine. And third, he doesn't need an introduction. Howie also said, I can see that you and Ginger are getting along nicely. That's what he said about Ginger. Well, what does that mean? What do you mean you can see they're getting along nicely? Were you not here the moment they met? Are you not the one that introduced these two? Hey, Dana, please meet the redhead, please meet Dana. Did you not do that? Where were you to observe them? See, this is the biggest thing that you need to understand. For Howie to make the statement, I can see you and the Ginger are getting along nicely. For him to say that, did you have Dana and you brought him into a podcast set where you were still in the back, powdering your nose and drinking your coffee? That's how much you valued his time. Then you put him in there with a stranger that's nothing to do with the show and you thought that they should just mingle and mesh? Because again, I've also had that happen to me, so I'm personalizing a little bit. That exact scenario that I just laid out ended a relationship between me and Michael Landsberg. He brought me in somewhere and I have a level of social anxiety and I can deal with it, but I have to know it's coming. He brought me into a room with somebody that I had never met. I spent ample amount of time, longer than the interview was even scheduled to be, getting to know a person that I hadn't met. I don't know why they'd be part of the interview. When I agreed to come on, I don't, why would I have somebody else? So I do have to ask you that. And if you guys know and you go, oh, Chael, you fool, that's his co-host. Oh, fair enough. I would go in a whole different angle where Howie Mandel, a guy that's been on TV for 3 decades, needs a co-host. That's why I don't think it is his co-host. I think it was a guy. I think it was a guest. I think Howie Mandel thought he was going to bring Dana White, the great philosopher, and put a different guest and have them mesh while he's trying to talk about a title fight that's coming up this weekend, while he's got all sorts of rumors looming about the sport's biggest star, Conor McGregor. Well, he's got all sorts of ins and outs going about the biggest card of all time scheduled, UFC 300. And Howie wants to tell him he's a philosopher. He wants to introduce him in the first place. I think it was a miss. I think it was insincere. I think it's going to be used. I think it's a spoof for Howie's podcast. I don't mind pitching in and helping him out if that's the case. I don't know why he has a podcast. I haven't the slightest idea. But as far as did Dana get up and walk out off of Howie's show? Was that a spoof? Was that made up? Was that the first time? And everybody would like to work an angle with Dana White. Everybody. Dana's never worked a WWE style angle in his life, but he did, and he did it with Howie Mandel and a redheaded guy in a podcast set that is so badly produced you need to wear a headset. No, man, I don't think so. I think Dana got up and walked out.